I'm Guillermo Sanchez Vela.
And I'm Lauren Gould. In today's show, a story about international students dealing with the realities of traveling home for the holidays as a new Trump administration looms.
And a movement in California prisons for fair wages.
Organizations were asking incarcerated folks to donate creative work, which would benefit the organization, but none of that money went back to the artist. And also very small stipends, $25, $50, that you should probably feel lucky to receive.
A story on how musicians are struggling to draw in crowds to cover venue fees.
10 to 15 people is kind of a lot of people to bring out to a show, and oftentimes it is equivalent to what the room fee is.
And where you can send your letters to Santa.
I get to shop for presents, and we get to send them to little girls, and I got to send a letter to Santa.
But up first, we have the international news.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Josh Kane. Luigi Mangione, the suspected shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, has just arrived in court in Pennsylvania following a second-degree murder charge in New York. As sheriffs removed him from their van, he attempted to yell a statement at the press. The NYPD is sending detectives to Pennsylvania for questioning. Police apprehended and arrested Mangione at a McDonald's restaurant in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after receiving a tip from a customer. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro gave a press conference with Altoona police.
The suspect was just arraigned here in the courthouse, and presumably New York will file charges very, very soon. That process will continue to play out, and justice will be delivered in this case.
Officers found a mask, a gun with a silencer, and a manifesto linking Mangione to the crime. The arrest follows a 6-day manhunt that spans state borders since the December 4th shooting in Midtown Manhattan. With Donald Trump preparing to return to the White House in January, President Joe Biden delivered a speech on Tuesday calling attention to his own economic legacy. Biden spoke at the Brookings Institution in Washington on his middle-out, bottom-up economic playbook as Trump's cabinet picks continue to seek support from Republican senators in the nation's capital. In Israel today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he plans to challenge his ongoing corruption trial as he faces charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of public trust, calling the charges absurd. Netanyahu took the stand today, becoming the first sitting leader in the nation's history to testify as a criminal defendant. The trial is another setback for Netanyahu, for whom an international arrest warrant was issued in November for alleged war crimes in the war in Gaza. The United Nations said today that it has resumed humanitarian aid in Syria, providing food, fuel, and other supplies to nearly 17 million people in need of assistance. Over 1 million people have been displaced in northern Syria following the overthrow of President Bashar Assad on Sunday as Israeli troops advanced towards Damascus. A wildfire ravaged Malibu, California this morning, prompting the evacuation of 6,000 residents, including students at nearby Pepperdine University. The Los Angeles County Fire Department did not immediately know the cause of the fire, but estimated that at least 2.8 square miles burned as fires were stoked by the Santa Ana winds. Baseball outfielder Juan Soto signed with the Mets on a record $765 million contract after the crosstown rival Yankees failed to match the Mets' offer. John Heyman of the New York Post reported that the Yankees' failure to provide Soto's family with a suite at Yankee Stadium was instrumental in his decision to leave the team. This is Josh Kane, Columbia Radio News.
Up next, face masks might seem like something of the past, but the recent arrest of Luigi Mangione has brought them back to the fore. Lauren Gould has more.
I think it's mistaken.
Luigi Mangione is facing second-degree murder charges for the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, Mayor Eric Adams is once again encouraging businesses and New Yorkers to ask people to remove their face coverings in public spaces. The mayor supports a mask ban in New York City. I talked to Robert Kahn, a law professor at St. Thomas University who researches mask laws, and I asked him what he thought about Mayor Adams' comments.
Captured the person in question. They have the person on film. They had him on film yesterday. And to me, it goes to a tendency for mask bans to be scapegoats or symbolic politics or whatever you want to call it, where there are problems in society and the easiest thing to do is to ban masks or to have mask bans that are overbroad and reach speech and activity that's completely constitutional. I don't understand the mayor's comments about if I'm getting into an Uber, I should show my face. I don't know how that helps to catch the killer of this tragic shooting in Manhattan.
Yeah, and going off of that, so from your perspective, would you say that enforcing such a policy where New Yorkers would have to pull down face coverings in public places, do you feel like this would be effective in stopping crime?
No. So often with these mask bans, there is absolutely no evidence that the ban in question will reduce criminal behavior, make criminality easier to spot. Oftentimes, the people who commit crimes are already identifiable. I also think in the most recent wave of mask bans, there's just a lack of respect for the experiences of people with disabilities, particularly people who need to mask, feel they need to mask because of long COVID, immune suppression, or something else. And the idea that you solve social problems off the backs of people who don't have a choice in the matter and might actually like to be able to show their face is really disappointing.
If Mayor Adams was able to effectively maybe place a temporary ban on masks in the city, what sort of legal challenges would lawyers use in court?
New York State can't disregard federal statutes like the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that there would be litigation, and most likely within the time frame of the litigation, the law in question. But there are other states. Georgia comes to mind. Georgia has a mask ban. The Georgia Supreme Court said that the mask ban is only enforceable when the behavior is done with the intent to intimidate others. And in fact, New York's incitement to riot statute works exactly the same way. There's an intent to, in this case, pose a clear and present danger to undertake imminent lawless action. The idea is that a society shouldn't be able to ban mask wearing in situations where it's clearly harmless.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Guillermo Sanchez Vela.
And I'm Lauren Gould.
Winter break is almost here. Students are finalizing travel plans with their loved ones. But many of the over 1 million international students in the U.S. are rethinking their travel plans. Reporter Mingwei Chin has the story.
Poppy Guo is a Chinese-born student studying at Cornell University. She's reliving last year's Spring Festival Gala, a show that China has aired on TV every year for the past 4 decades on Lunar New Year.
Actually, it's a little bit weird because I'm not a fan of this show when I was home before. I'm usually just forced to watch it by my parents.
But watching it is a Chinese tradition. The song is called 难忘今宵, which means it's hard to forget this night, and it's a regular grand finale.
But I miss it a lot while I'm here, and it might be cliche or boring, like the show looks same every year. I've found that this kind of old traditional stuff turns to stir up my homesickness.
Which is a problem because this year Guo won't be going home for the holiday like she had planned to. She's from one of the top 5 countries sending students to the US, China. But the new government has threatened to stricter border policies, and many schools, including Cornell and NYU, have released statements advising international students like her to return by January 20, a week and a half before the Lunar New Year.
It is so sad. If I only could pick one day back to China, I'm gonna pick the Chinese New Year. But now I can't. It's supposed to be a reunion day, and it's heartbreaking not to be with my family.
Qi Zheng is an immigration lawyer based in Flushing. She says that although the new administration hasn't targeted international students' travel, she has some advice for the students. She even prepared a statement for our interview.
Adhering to this advice is prudent. It can prevent disruptions in students' educational paths. We advise students to adjust their travel plans accordingly, maintain close contact with their university international office, and prepare all necessary documents, which may include re-entry permits, proof of enrollment, recent transcripts, and a valid student visa.
India, South Korea, Canada, and Taiwan also send hundreds of thousands of students to the US each year. Zheng says her advice isn't only for this vacation, but also applies long-term future.
We do get a lot of inquiries from students who are worried about not just this vacation, but their future. We do anticipate an increase in the complexity of the visa application process, particularly for STEM subjects. Also, potential reforms could involve stricter requirements for the H-1B visa lottery system, as evidenced during the previous term of the Trump administration. In the long run, this may affect a student's wish to come to the U.S. to study.
Compared to last year, China and South Korea have seen a small decline in the number of international students. The new advice could cause more students like Guo to question their choice to come to the US.
If I had chosen like Hong Kong or Singapore, I would have been preparing New Year gift for my family members now.
Guo lost over $1,000 for canceling her flight. She still doesn't know if she can go home next year. Mingwei Qin, Columbia Radio News.
Public libraries are more than just shelves of books. They're hubs of learning and connection. But with book bans and the ongoing culture wars in the air, how are these neighborhood centers adapting? Madeline Riley has the story.
Go into any public library across the city, and you might come across a small table of books like Toni Morrison's Sula or The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand next to an info card about banned books. These books are the small battles libraries across the country are fighting. Just last week, 2 books were added to the list of banned books in South Carolina. One of them was a textbook for middle schoolers. But the organizations like IMLS, which is the Institute for Museums and Libraries, or the American Library Association, ALA, are anticipating a longer fight. The first Trump administration threatened to cut the funding for these organizations. However, they failed. Now, this time around, libraries are more ready and know what to anticipate.
We do not expect for the administration to look kindly towards, obviously, education. But then when you say education, to many people, that includes libraries, right? It's not like they're distinct things, but not just libraries, but also cultural institutions.
Alan Anyone is an executive director of the American Library Association. He says he's not too concerned about the funding, but the first Trump administration did try and fail to cut funding for the IMLS, though he hopes to keep this a nonpartisan issue. The real battle, he says, is in the court of public opinion. For Emily Drabinski, who is a professor of library sciences at CUNY Queens College, the job of librarians is evolving.
When I went to library school, I went because I cared about books and knowledge and the organization of those things, and ensuring access to information for all. Now I think the job description of a librarian is different, and in many ways that won't change with the new administration. We continue to be in libraries one of the only institutions that serves the entire public.
Charlie Loftus, who is studying library sciences and getting a master's, says he has some worries about those changing roles, especially when it comes to the relationship they have with the public.
Again, I feel pretty safe in my role and what I do, but I've heard stories of librarians that are working in public schools losing their jobs because their state changed their rules about what couldn't be in the collection, and they had too many quote-unquote diverse books, or quotas for diverse books, which is horrifying.
Just last week, South Carolina added 2 books to their banned books list, one of which was a textbook for middle schoolers. And with that, I'm Madeline Riley from Columbia Radio News.
For those who are working behind bars, wages can be as low as 12 cents an hour. There is now a push for them to be compensated for their work. Vahini Shori reports on how advocates for incarcerated artists are fighting for them to be fairly compensated.
The reality is that not only must I continue this work because That's Sarah Keeley, a journalist in Westchester County. You may have read her work in New York Focus or Slate.
But also because it is the only way I have to make a living, to be able to sustain my needs. If I stop where I can keep my body and my food, if I have my college education, would be able to do the work that I do in the library for my peers.
Keeley is currently incarcerated at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in Westchester County, New York. While reporting, she is taking college classes and is a resource at the prison's law library where she assists her peers. Her tuition costs $5, or at least 20 hours of prison labor at an above-average wage of 25 cents an hour. The typewriter she uses to write? About 1,400 hours at the same rate. Right now, Keeley doesn't have that typewriter. Despite it having been approved for use, the prison confiscated it in retaliation for a piece Keeley recently published exposing solitary confinement practices. As you heard, that money makes the world of a difference in prison, which is why organizations Archive-Based Creative Arts, ABCA, Working Artists in the Greater Economy, WAGE, Empowerment Avenue, and the Freelance Solidarity Project came together on December 4th to educate the public on the fight for the rights of incarcerated writers, artists, and archivists to make money for their work. Emily Nonko, the co-founder of Empowerment Avenue, explained what was happening.
Organizations were asking incarcerated folks to donate creative work to their organization, which would benefit the organization, but none of that money went back to the artist. And also very small stipends, $25, $50, that you should probably feel lucky to receive. I came into the space thinking there was going to be some framework or understanding around how do we get folks paid real money, and actually found there were very little resources to do this work.
Organizations engaging in these practices, many you've heard of. Think the Museum of Modern Art and PEN America. One of the tools to combat this is a fee calculator developed by WAGE, one of the organizations mentioned earlier. Lise Suskoln explains it this way.
It's just for the work of working with an institution, which makes sense. It's a very specific transactional relationship that's very tightly defined here.
Although thorough and helpful, developing this calculator using 990 forms isn't the hard part. It's getting this information inside. That's where players from Archive-Based Creative Arts, Empowerment Avenue, and the Freelance Solidarity Project come in. They convert online databases and spreadsheets to analog forms, like books and zines, to disseminate within prison walls. But in their words, even that's a crapshoot. The work continues through these organizations and artists committed to their work. You can find archive-based visual art, writing, and graphic design work from incarcerated cultural workers on display at Essex Flowers Gallery in Chinatown through December 15th, 2024. Vahini Shori, Uptown Radio.
Every year, the U.S. launches multiple campaigns urging most Americans to get their flu vaccines. However, European countries like Poland and Italy don't make the same push. To help us make sense of these conflicting strategies, we turn to my co-host, Guillermo Sanchez Vela.
Every year, the CDC encourages everyone in the U.S. to get the flu vaccine. The EU, however, recommends that only at-risk people get jabs. This has led to wildly different vaccination rates. Poland, for example, has a vaccination rate a sixth of the U.S.'s, yet features an identical infection rate. Blake Bodie is a first-year medical student at SUNY Buffalo and talks about how tomorrow's doctors are trained in the matter.
You're recommended to get them every year as well. There are sometimes patients will have hesitancy because they'll think that because they got a vaccine last year, they don't need to get it this year. We're also taught to be compassionate when encouraging patients to get the vaccines. You don't want to push them to do it, but you want to make sure they understand the risks of not getting it.
Mercedes Cuanda Alonso is a pharmacist in Madrid and speaks on the targeted strategy, which is tailored to each patient by their doctor.
I think this role in educating the public in flu prevention and the benefits of vaccination, it's more of a doctor role. They just go to the doctor and maybe the doctor prescribes the vaccine, but they just go to the pharmacy with the doctor's prescription just to get the vaccine, and they don't ask anything because they've already talked to the doctor.
The vaccine is made annually using the previous year's strains. However, influenza is a highly mutagenic virus, meaning it evolves every few weeks or months, diluting the effectiveness of the vaccine. We spoke with Cristina Maceria, a former Pfizer employee who specialized in infectious disease vaccine distribution.
Flu vaccines, unfortunately, is not very effective. It really depends a lot year by year. So effectiveness can vary from 20 to 60%. A 20% effectiveness is just, you flip a coin, you have more probability, right? So it's very low.
Why does the U.S. mount such a big campaign? Christina says it's because of a higher need.
I think the proportion of individuals high risk in the US is a lot higher than in general it's in Europe, right? So if we look at people over 40 in the US, there is a very large proportion that are high risk.
This is due to the US's unhealthier population, which is 50% more overweight than Europeans.
Yeah, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular issues, you see a lot more. I mean, clearly with obesity, it comes all the other implications. And
which is due to America's different culture and lifestyle.
Less physical activity, or in the US is normal always to take the car wherever you're going, and not spending as much time outside as you would have in Europe.
Given this information, is Christina vaccinating herself every year?
So I'm not. I give it to my kids and every year. And but knowing the effectiveness and knowing I'm not at risk, I'm not.
Influenza is dangerous and can prove fatal to at-risk patients. Yet there's little evidence to show that healthy adults benefit from getting a jab. The low efficiency of the vaccines means that you're not preventing the spreading of the virus much either. For America's greater health problems, the current flu strategy is a band-aid. A longer-term fix requires a change in lifestyle and diets. If you want to protect yourself from the flu this season, maybe less burgers and more gazpacho. Guillermo Sanchez Vela, Columbia Radio News.
Literacy is down in New York City schools. Half of students are reading below their grade level, according to state test results. Last year, the city issued a mandate requiring all elementary schools to use one of 3 approved reading programs. But as Rino Hashimoto reports, these programs demand more time from parents and teachers and are standardized, which benefits some kids more than others.
These 3 programs follow a methodology called the Science of Reading and replace a previous system called Balanced Literacy.
It was not a curriculum that was appropriate for 65% of the kids in New York City schools.
That's Susan Masulo, a literacy professor at Columbia University Teachers College. Her son was in a balanced literacy program.
But by the time he was in 4th grade, he couldn't spell. So I had to fix him.
She says it took her just 2 days to, quote, fix him with a Science of Reading approach. But not every child has a reading specialist for a mom.
I'm not a native English speaker, and I don't really speak to them in English. And everything my kids have is from the school, so I can't really supplement at home as much. And so for me, I miss the old way.
Motoko Shouboji is a mother of 2 girls, Mila and Amelie. Amelie is a 3rd grader at PS 33, an elementary school that implemented the Wit and Wisdom curriculum this year. Shouboji says Amelie is reading less and has minimal homework.
There has been no writing homework at all. Reading homework, none. They just say read 30 minutes every night.
Shouboji says she doesn't know how her daughter is progressing because the mandate also nixed reading level assessments. Not to mention,
everyone reads the same book and everyone's taught in the same way and everyone has the same goal and the answer is kind of the same for everyone. If that's the case, I don't know how much deeper they can really go in terms of writing and even reading too.
Shouboji hasn't raised these concerns to Amelie's teacher, whom she's known since 2019 when she taught Mila.
She is a fan of this program. And so I'm like, oh, if you say that, then I cannot complain because I trust her fully.
Shouboji doesn't feel as strongly as the 1,300 plus New York City parents who have signed a petition to stop the mandate.
The petition echoes Shoboji's observations, namely that the curricula impose narrow topics of study, limit which books kids can read, and do not reflect individual student needs. When she visited Amelie's ELA class, she noticed that one of the more advanced students was bored.
She's like, okay, I'm done. I feel so bad for her because she can read this thick book in a week or something, but then she has to read this little book about shark. The kids who may want more and more, why would you change what was working?
Meanwhile, teachers are overwhelmed.
They need a lot of professional support to get used to it. Some schools are supplying that, some schools need to supply more.
As a result, teachers at PS33 are reluctant to allocate classroom hours for enrichment and community building as they have in the past. These fun activities leave less time for instruction of what they consider a very rigorous curriculum. It's still too early to run efficacy studies for any of these programs because some schools began using them last year while others only a couple months ago. None of the one-size-fits-all curricula is perfect, but the mandate is here to stay, so parents should expect to spend more time reading with their children. Rino Hashimoto, Columbia Radio News.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, but for some vendors, the holiday season means a lot of hard work on New York City's chilly streets.
That's right. Some Christmas tree sellers spend 5 weeks living out of their vans, braving the cold to sell trees on the sidewalks.
Josh Kane takes us behind the scenes of the business of Christmas.
Each year when the holiday season comes knocking, the Tree Man of Manhattan sets up shop on the corner of St. Nicholas Avenue and Frederick Douglass Boulevard with dozens of Christmas trees under a web of Christmas lights. Tree Man, who gave his name as Raytheon Stillwater, comes all the way from British Columbia, Canada to sell Christmas trees on the streets of New York.
These guys go 200. 200? Yeah. Perfect. I'll be back tomorrow. Great. I'll be here. Thank you very much. You're very welcome.
Stillwater, sporting a festive red and green cap with Tree Man emblazoned across the brim, says he sells trees to folks and families of all kinds. He's even got a bushy white beard.
Do kids ever ask if you're Santa?
I cultivated this beard more so this year than in previous years. I was fatter in previous years and got called Santa more often.
Stillwater's livelihood revolves around trees. Back home in Canada, he owns and maintains an apple orchard. But he first became interested in trees as an emergency responder.
My forestry connection was I was a firefighter in BC, British Columbia Forestry, years and years ago. So that was my seasonal gig that was tree related.
This year, a delayed start to the holiday season meant a delay in profits for Stillwater's business. As New Yorkers scramble to buy trees for the holiday, Stillwater scrambles to keep up with demand.
It's a short season, so everyone seems much more in a rush to get their trees since Thanksgiving fell late this year.
Tree fever is what professionals in the Christmas tree trade call a seasonal influx of tree buyers, but it also has another meaning in the industry. It's a phenomenon that happens to the tree vendors themselves.
Because that's a term that our bosses used, that people got, when you started, you either got tree fever or you didn't, so you came back forever and ever and ever.
Tree fever doesn't only manifest in passion for the job. According to Stillwater, rivalries in the Christmas tree trade can inspire some unfriendly competition.
There's a lot of stories about, and tongue-in-cheek, I say, like, the tree mafia, tongue-in-cheek, though I know it used to be rougher and very territorial.
Across the northern border, Stillwater says the market for trees isn't quite as competitive as it is in New York. Joining the lumber industry is more common amongst Canadian seasonal hires looking for odd jobs.
In Canadian university, everyone would go off because you can make a lot of money spending a miserable 3 months up in northern Canada planting trees.
Stillwater isn't the only one running the stand. His partner, Luke McDonough, assists with handling and trimming the trees. He hauls the trees into a conical device called a baler, then saws the trunk to the customer's desired height and bundles the whole tree up into a net. Out of a small red shack, he sells knickknacks and accessories for the trees, including pots and soil.
We have the wreaths, 3 different sizes of stands, these little snowmen and reindeer we make out of the stumps that we cut off the bottom of the tree. That's just something we do on the side that we can sell to put cash in our pocket.
For 5 weeks out of the year, McDonough and Stillwater call this street corner their home, living out of their cars and selling trees day and night. And just as mysteriously as they arrive,
all the stands and the shack and everything shows up. They drop it off on the sidewalk in a kit, and we just screw it all together in one day. And then that's the last week of November. And then on Christmas Day, we take it all apart within a couple hours and sweep up, and it's like we were never here.
Octavio Moore has been a returning customer to this stand for 6 years. Moore admits that he's picky about Christmas trees, and Stillwater's business is able to meet his needs.
Well, first off, it's convenient. I live in Harlem, not far. My business is not far. And ever since the very first time I came here, they have a great selection of trees. And I have been able every year to actually find a tree that works for me. So I come here.
Even throughout the chaos of the holiday season, tree frenzy is no problem for Moore. Returning to Stillwater's Christmas tree stand is something he looks forward to every year.
I love this holiday because most people are trying their best to do what's right and do the best thing. So I just love Christmas. So here we are, and let's go.
In Manhattan, the Christmas tree that bends with the wind survives the frenzy. Josh Kane, Columbia Radio News.
This is Uptown Radio, and I'm Lauren Gould. You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm Lauren Gould.
And I'm Guillermo Sanchez Vela. Coming up, progressive Democrats tell the party to shape up in time for the next gubernatorial race.
And the MTA's plan to make the subway more accessible with funds from congestion pricing.
And in the Bronx, what it's like to rent from the man who placed second on the city's worst landlords list.
But this is the thing. She complaining about the riot and stuff like that. When the exterminator come every month, they don't open the door.
And hold on to those letters for Santa.
I asked Santa for Christmas is a doll bed and a stuffed dog.
These stories and more coming up. But first, the headlines.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Reno Hashimoto. In the past hour, the Manhattan District Attorney made public filed paperwork that proposed keeping Trump's conviction on the books. The district attorney said Trump's position as president-elect does not shield him from prosecution. New York City will vacate 25 migrant shelters by the end of March, city officials announced this morning. One of those shelters is Floyd Bennett Field in South Brooklyn. In recent weeks, the mutual aid volunteer group Floyd Bennett Field Neighbors has urged the city to close the 2,000-bed tent shelter before Trump's inauguration. They're concerned it could be repurposed as a detention center. These migrants will be moved out by January 15th. The number of new arrivals has been steadily decreasing. The FBI has issued a statement that it's investigating the mystery drone sightings that have now spread from New Jersey to New York. The drones were spotted by residents in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, adding to numerous sightings across the Garden State in recent weeks. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says he is taking the sightings, quote, deadly seriously. Police have just released surveillance video and photos of the 3 men who are suspected to have stabbed 2 migrant teenagers last week. The NYPD continued to investigate the murder of 17-year-old Yeremy Colino and an unidentified 18-year-old who is recovering from injuries. Police now believe the incident was between 2 rival gangs. Police initially reported that the suspects asked the teenagers if they spoke English before stabbing them, but on Monday, Mayor Adams questioned the veracity of that account because it, quote, wasn't in any documentation or any of the interviews, end quote, around the incident. The Booker Prize Foundation announced that longtime New Yorker Sarah Jessica Parker will sit on the 2025 judging panel for the prestigious British Literary Award. Parker says that she's over the moon, despite acknowledging that she was an unlikely pick. Later tonight, the New York Islanders will face off against the LA Kings in UBS Arena. Puck drops at 7:30 p.m. Reno Hashimoto, Columbia Radio News.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Lauren Gould.
Democrats faced big losses in New York during the presidential election. It's left some in the party worried about the 2026 gubernatorial race. Governor Kathy Hochul's approval ratings have hit a record low, adding to concerns about the future.
As Jake Angelo reports, the Democratic Party's progressive wing is already making a Plan B.
Kathy Hochul is in big trouble with progressives. Her back and forth on congestion pricing angered many New Yorkers. Here she is last year announcing the plan for the first time.
We are going to be the very first state in the nation, the very first city in America to have a congestion pricing plan.
And here's Hochul again, a year later.
I have directed the MTA to indefinitely pause the program.
She's going to get the worst of both worlds electorally on that.
That's George Albiro of the New York Progressive Action Network. He says Hochul's flip-flopping on congestion pricing angered progressives and conservatives alike. He calls her behavior flighty and says it may have cost her re-election. And now she's paying the price. He says she should have never backed down on the plan in the first place.
This was a law that was passed. You can't just ignore a law. If you think it was wrongly passed, it was so undemocratic.
But other progressives, like Jamel Henderson of Citizen Action, says Hochul can stay in the race, under some conditions. To win back voters, he says Hochul needs to implement progressive policies, like expanding healthcare access for New Yorkers and increasing taxes on the rich.
64 billionaires, if I'm not mistaken, are here in the state of New York chilling. They're not leaving our state. Have them pay their fair share.
Actually, there are more than double the amount of billionaires in the state. Henderson says that if Hochul fails to deliver these policies, then it's time for her to step aside for another candidate. Miles Coleman is a political analyst at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. He predicts the outcome of races. He says that the presidential election results show that progressive politics in New York are at a dead end.
The kind of Democratic brand just might not be that good.
Coleman says when you take Hochul and add in Mayor Eric Adams, who's been indicted on multiple fraud charges, the Democrats' image in New York may have been ruined. And he says a more progressive party won't repair their image.
I think the suburbanites in places like Long Island or upstate, they're not comfortable with the Democratic Party that's too far left.
He says Hochul is so unpopular that she might not even make it past the primary, something rare for an incumbent in the state.
It is definitely, I think there's enough kind of discontent within the state party.
Congressman Richie Torres of the Bronx has already signaled his desire to challenge Hochul. And Republicans have floated names like Congressman Mike Lawler, who just won re-election in a competitive district. They're also gearing up for the race. Jake?
Less than a third of New York City subways are accessible to those with mobility issues. The MTA has agreed to raise this number over the next 3 decades, aiming to make 95% of the remaining stations accessible by federal guidelines.
But budget deficits have halted progress. Now, with congestion pricing set to resume in January, so will the accessibility project. But is this project in the best interest of those it seeks to serve? Nikita Apte reports.
After a class action lawsuit was settled 2 years ago, the MTA has begun work on making most of the city's stations accessible. This means building elevators and ramps in compliance with the American Disabilities Act. But faced with budget constraints, progress has been slow.
It's nice to have an elevator. It's not a bad thing, but it's a costly thing. And because the stations are old, it's very difficult to retrofit them with ramps because there are steps and all kinds of impediments.
That's Frederick Salvucci, former Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under Governor Michael Dukakis. He says this project may not be the best way of increasing mobility options for individuals with disabilities. One problem is the time it will take.
There are lots of people in wheelchairs who do not have access to this society. So I think we ought to be focusing on how do we help people. And to me, that would lead you to much better paratransit services that could be implemented quickly and a gradual upgrade of the system.
Paratransit services, which are van services with wheelchair lifts, provide door-to-door transport with no need for transfers. John Ottavucci, manager of the MIT Transit Research Program, agrees that this is a better option.
And especially in this time where all of these transit agencies right now are facing an incredible fiscal crisis because of all the loss of fares during the pandemic.
So far in 2024, the MTA has seen a 5.5% decrease in revenue from train and bus fares. Budget constraints have slowed work on the accessibility project. Jessica Murray, member of Rise to Resist and part of an elevator action group raising awareness about the project, says the terms are uncertain too. She is part of the MTA's accessibility advisory team.
Completing is, a little bit of a fuzzy term too, because I think they wrote in the agreement that as long as they've kind of awarded the contracts out, then they're on track.
Congestion pricing, which will resume at a reduced rate of $9, will provide 1/3 of the funding to make stations accessible. For disability advocates that have been waiting for its resumption, this is a win. But whether the project will be a success remains to be seen. Nikita Apte, Columbia Radio News.
You can see live music every night of the week. But many of these shows are made up of smaller artists who are increasingly performing at their own cost. Johanna Sommer has more.
The front door.
Around 9 at night, Avery Milner is huddled under a doorway across the street from the venue Purgatory. That's where his folk rock band Whirlybird just played. They have nearly 10,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, but that doesn't mean that people are buying tickets.
It takes a lot of money to be a good band, and it takes a lot of money to be a really band too.
Whirlybird generally makes up to $50 to $200 per show, a number split 4 ways with his bandmates. This comes with an emotional cost as well.
Majority of the nights I'm paying them $12. That makes me feel bad.
One of the reasons the band's ticket cut can be so small is because the band has to pay a room fee, which costs up to $500.
10 to 15 people is kind of a lot of people to bring out to a show, and oftentimes it is equivalent to what the room fee is.
He'll never tell me where he's going next.
Jenna Andriozzi's lush indie rock band J. Rosie just came off the stage. For her, the main concern is being able to pay the musicians in her band.
If you're not kind of like doubling your audience every show, you end up in a position where you are oftentimes losing money.
Venues will sometimes ask bands to agree to a radius clause, too. This means the band is not allowed to play in the same city a couple of weeks before or after to attract the biggest audience possible. Todd Patrick is the founder of Trans Pecos, a venue in Ridgewood. Tonight, 3 bands are playing. If the show sells out, the most each band can make is $250. Then each band has to split profits between themselves, and then there's a room fee and taxes. Patrick has noticed 2 things: less turnout since the pandemic, and sound engineers and bartenders want more money.
There is much less of that sensibility of support of the cause because it's enriching your life, etc., and a lot more, first things first, I need to get paid what I consider to be a living wage, and that makes everything quite a bit more expensive.
He says that the room fee doesn't cover the cost of the staff wages for a show. Just like the bands he books, Patrick is just hoping to break even. Johanna Sommer, Columbia Radio News.
Battles between landlords and tenants in New York City are tales as old as the city itself. But some tenant-landlord relationships are more fraught than others. David Tenenbaum is number 2 on this year's Worst Landlords list released by the Public Advocate's Office. He owns 3 adjacent buildings on the same block in the South Bronx. Residents there say it can take years to get management to respond to dire conditions. Chris Yoen has more.
The front door of Ulysses Garcia's building on 138th Street is open, but not because he wants it to be. It's because he says the lock has been broken for years.
People use, these stairs and the other stairs out there for using drugs.
Eloina Espinoza is standing in the doorway to her unit on the ground floor.
Hola,
Miss. Hola. She's lived in Unit 1 for 12 years. She's not so comfortable speaking English, so Ulysses translates.
She says she have a leaking problem in the bathroom for almost 3 years and just
Espinoza pulls up a picture on her phone. There's a hole in the ceiling big enough for a person to fit through. Do you know? Could you ask her if she would mind if I could just see the bathroom to see the ceiling? This building has 86 open HPD violations. Mold in the ceilings and walls, broken appliances, and rat and roach infestations. Yeah. Espinoza says management repaired the ceiling 2 months after she called 311. But she says the last time it was repaired, it caved in nearly onto one of her children who was taking a bath. Now, the ceiling is sagging again.
She has rats in there, no mice, it's rats, big ones.
Garcia takes me to meet the super, Christian. He doesn't want his last name used on the radio.
Hola.
I ask him about the broken front door and the drug users.
Tenants, they always want to put it on the landlord, super, and this and that, but they don't do their job. No, don't call me, call the police.
But the
That's
repairs
it.
in the apartments, there's a big problem in there, always, for years. Like this lady over here on the first floor, she complaining about the rats.
But this is the thing. She complaining about the rat and stuff like that. When the exterminator come every month, they don't open the door. Like, people complain about bullshit and they make no sense.
Christian, the super, tells me that he'll send an exterminator at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. But a couple days later, when I text Eloina Espinoza, she says the exterminator came. It helped. A little bit with the roaches, but not the rats. When asked about the lack of repairs and safety issues in the building, the management company did not respond to a request for comment. Chris Yoen, Columbia Radio News.
In more international news, South Korea's economy has teetered since President Yoon Suk-yeol's temporary imposition of martial law last week. The fallout of his decision has plunged the country into turmoil. It's thrown the economic balance of the Pacific into doubt, with the Korean won and its stock market swooning. The incoming Trump administration will add further uncertainty regarding the U.S.'s foreign policy in the region. Dr. Victor Cha has advised the W. Bush and Biden administrations on defense policy and East Asian affairs, and is currently the Korea chair at Georgetown University's Center for Strategic and International Studies. I asked him how the situation in South Korea will affect the U.S. economy and its regional alliances. Example, the microchip sector that the U.S. is heavily dependent on. A lot of chips are made by Samsung in Korea.
Great question. I talked to a lot of institutional investors, hedge fund managers and things, and my sense is that they have always priced in North Korean risk. So they've always priced in the threat of North Korea to the extent that North Korea could do a nuclear test, and it really doesn't shake the markets much because they've already priced all that in. What they have not priced in is political instability in South Korea. And if you have a government that is effectively not functioning, it hasn't been impeached, it will raise a lot of concerns about, whether the Korean government can make sound economic policy, sound economic decisions. So they're part of the CHIPS 4 alliance with the United States, Japan, and Taiwan. They have tens of billions of dollars of investment in the United States in the electric vehicle battery market. The Biden administration has counted on President Yoon for all he's done to improve relations with Japan and to thereby improve and consolidate the trilateral relationship among the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, which is an important bulwark against not just North Korea, but also China. So he's actually been a very critical player in many different areas. And so his emasculation politically and the absence of a solution, most importantly, the inability to identify a solution, will create a lot of market uncertainty in Korea.
And also looking forward to the upcoming administration, President-elect Trump has promised blanket tariffs on all imported goods, which some see as a negotiating tactic, but could this political crisis in South Korea also place it at a disadvantage in any future trade negotiations with the U.S.?
In terms of the tariffs, I don't think it's a negotiation tactic. I mean, I think that he'll come out and do it. Basically, every Indo-Pacific ally of the United States, except Australia, currently has a trade surplus with the United States. I would expect that Trump is going to immediately start with tariffs on all of these countries that have trade surpluses. And at that point, then maybe each ally will then try to cut deals to negotiate some of that down. But the difference is that other allies will have governments in place, will have a plan that they have to initiate once the tariffs come. I mean, I think they're all sort of planning for that. And the problem, of course, is in Korea, none of that's going to be happening because they're all focused on this political crisis.
And then my final question, what outcome do you believe would most benefit the Trump administration from this whole fallout?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is political stability in Korea. So that means resolving the current crisis as quickly as possible, identifying what is the path out, whether it's impeachment, whatever is the identifiable solution to this crisis is the most important thing for both Korean democracy and for the United States, whether we're talking about Biden or Trump.
Dr. Victor Cha, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Distrust of modern medicine is a hot-button issue. Donald Trump has nominated Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a vaccine denier, to lead the Department of Health. And a study published by the National Library of Medicine shows a 17% increase in alternative medicine over the last decade. But as my great co-host Lauren Gould reports, businesses in New York City have understood the public's interest in alternative medicine for years.
Flower Power Herbs and Roots is nestled on an unassuming corner in the East Village. Customers come here when they are not feeling well. But one thing is for sure, there is no Advil or Tums in sight.
I've noticed mullein has been trending. Mullein is a herb for the respiratory system.
That's Alicia Proto. She works as an herbalist here. She helps customers find the right combination for them. The store's shelves are teeming with jars of Tulsi, alfalfa, uva ursi, and valerian. She says that the kind of customers who come here want to try herbal medicine first before going to a mainstream doctor. Proto is a customer herself. She grew up far away from nature, but became more interested in herbal medicine after meeting friends at yoga teacher training.
I just kind of slowly shifted my lifestyle to incorporating more herbal medicine, and my mental health improved vastly.
Proto sees natural medicine as a way to connect with the earth. She says she has seen the benefits firsthand.
Magic of herbal medicine is that it's just not that you're using a gentler medicine compared to pharmaceuticals, but you're actually connecting with the earth and you're connecting with the spirit of the earth and the plant. Herbs are alive, and when you take the time to also respect the medicine and the spirit of the plants, it shifts something in you. It opens up a whole world of magic.
A few blocks away is Crystal's Garden. It's another business that caters to customers who want alternative ways to heal. Its front is decorated with dream catchers, and its sign is in an eye-catching purple. It's cold out, but there are still customers browsing displays of sage out front.
It's more natural, and it's more healing, and it helps you connect to your higher self.
That's Marcia Mills. She has worked at Crystal's Garden for 5 years.
Other medicine, sometimes they put you on the prescriptions and you don't even need to.
Science has not recognized crystals as a way to heal, but Mills says there are certain crystals she and her customers gravitate towards the most.
The best, I would say cornelian and rose quartz. Everybody's always looking for love.
Mills says that carnelian and rose quartz are known to manifest romantic relationships. That is why they are such bestsellers. If you haven't yet tried out alternative health, you can stop by Flower Power Herbs and Roots Winter Solstice event on December 21st. Lauren Gould, Columbia Radio News.
Trains have become a beloved and iconic part of the city's festivities each holiday season. Decked-out commuter rail cars and festive train shows captivate locals and tourists alike. Reporter Amanda Purcell explores what makes these seasonal attractions so popular.
It's a chilly afternoon in the Bronx. Ozzy Ozaris has just taken his 2-year-old daughter to see the New York Botanical Gardens Holiday Train Show. It's a tradition he's passing on to the next generation.
In New York City, it's all about transportation, so it brings up the holiday spirit and stuff like that.
Here, miniature trains pass botanical models of 200 iconic New York City landmarks. You can peek through the windows of Macy's department store, see a lit-up Yankee Stadium, and walk under the Brooklyn Bridge. An outdoor display was added this year.
Like the Christmas trees, like all surrounded, very nice, very cute.
Adrian Benepi devised the first holiday train show in 1992. He shared a little-known fact about its origin.
That was inspired by a pre-Raphaelite painting. I said, what we need is replicas of old New York houses, landmarks, as if built by pre-Raphaelite fairies, made from natural materials.
From the Botanical Garden, you can take the Metro-North Railroad's new holiday train to Manhattan. On the outside, the trains are decked out in wreaths and red and green lights. On the inside, holiday greetings and festive music are played over the loudspeaker. Three blocks north of Grand Central Terminal is the Red Caboose, a model train hobby shop. Owner Alan Spitz said interest in building model trains has waned over the years, but nostalgia for trains at Christmas time is evergreen.
But if you put trains in a store window or shop window, stop tons of people all the time. I mean, that's why the Bronx Botanical Garden runs trains and why the Lionel layout at Grand Central is like, busy, dizzy, and whizzy.
The New York Transit Museum's Nostalgia Train is the last stop on my tour. Every Sunday in December, visitors dress to the nines, the 1940s and 50s, that is, and line up at the 2nd Avenue subway stop. Michelle Corsi from Brooklyn has ridden the vintage train for 15 years.
I love the old ads. I love the fans. I love how much the train moves back and forth when you're moving. And I just love seeing the joy of people, especially when the old train pulls into a platform and you see people not expecting it. You see their faces and they're just like overjoyed and in wonderment, and it's really cool.
The rides were cut short last year after vandals stole vintage parts, but now the cars are back and with security dressed in period police garb.
I was very, very happy when they brought them back, and I hope they're always here. I think it's kind of like a togetherness because, there's not many things that we do physically together anymore with the advent of social media, and this is something like you have to physically go to this train and be on it with other human beings, but everyone's a lot happier than they are on a normal train, just because of the nostalgia of it all.
Whether on the rails or on display, trains bring joy to all ages this holiday season. Amanda Purcell, Columbia Radio News.
And finally, every December, thousands of hopeful kids send letters to Santa Claus. But sometimes the North Pole gets so busy that Santa needs help fulfilling everyone's Christmas wishes.
But no need to worry. The United States Postal Service steps up to lighten the load with Operation Santa. Dana Binfet is here to explain how this program got its start.
7-year-old Jasmine lives in upstate New York, and she knows exactly what she wants for Christmas.
I asked Santa for Christmas is a doll bed and a stuffed dog.
And she didn't just ask Santa for a gift this year. She's also an extra special helper.
I get to shop for presents, and we get to send them to little girls.
She and her grandmother, Lainey Seffert, have been taking part in Operation Santa for the past 3 years, and it's become something of a tradition. For over 100 years, the Postal Service has invited people to answer kids' letters or even buy the gifts on their lists. Last year, almost 30,000 kids received a response.
Just coincidentally, I happened to see a post for the Operation Santa, and I thought, oh, cool. So I went on, and I adopted a couple of letters that year and sent presents out to a couple of little kids.
Do you remember any of the letters you adopted?
Adopted a little boy who just wanted Matchbox cars and some clothes, and another little girl who needed a winter coat.
Operation Santa has been delivering letters and presents across the country for over a century. But how did the program get its start?
So Operation Santa, you have to start with Santa Claus, who became a popular figure due to the poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas."
That's Steve Kirkesberger. When it comes to Postal Service history, he is the guy.
So shortly after that, children began writing to Santa, telling them their Christmas wishes. And one popular early method of mailing letters to Santa was to burn them in the fireplace so the smoke could carry their wishes to the North Pole. But some children thought that maybe they'd be better off sending it through the Postal Service.
These kids weren't taking any chances with their Christmas lists, but Kirkesberger says the letters to Santa weren't always welcome.
So the problem with sending letters to Santa was postal policy prohibited their delivery. Letters with fictitious addresses had to be sent to the dead letter office in Washington, where postal clerks opened and ultimately destroyed the letters.
Some of the postal clerks bent the rules and took it upon themselves to answer children's letters. And in 1912, Postmaster General Hitchcock came up with a solution. He established Operation Santa, creating Santa's first ever federally funded mailroom. Today, the post office says that thousands of letters to Santa are helped on their way right here in New York City.
Being a letter carrier, I love my job, bottom of my heart.
Gore Biswas has been delivering mail in Midtown Manhattan for almost 30 years. He's standing under the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree as they set up the stage and cameras for tonight's annual tree lighting celebration. Everyone's at work.
Especially during the holiday season, we get a lot of packages and a lot of mail also.
Biswas says the post office is a pretty special place to work this time of year. And if you'd like to play Santa, you can adopt a letter at USPSOperationSanta.com. Or if you'd like to send your Christmas list, his address is Santa 123 Elf Road, North Pole. Dana Binfet, Columbia Radio News.
Well, that's it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Today, our executive producer was Chris Yohn. Senior editor Amanda Purcell and assistant editor Madeline Riley led our copy team.
Our senior producer is Jake Angelo. Assistant producer is Ming-Wei Chen. Our newscasters are Reno Hashimoto and Josh Kane.
In the studio was director Dana Binfet with board operator Nikita Apte and soundbite coordinator Johanna Sommer. Our web editor Vahini Shori got this stream live to the web. Our instructors Sally Herships and Golda Arthur advise our staff. I'm Guillermo Sanchez Vela.
And I'm Lauren Gould. Columbia Radio News is live on Tuesdays at 2, but you can always find us at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.